The St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, in partnership with Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network, presents a podcast for families in crisis.
Hi, welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. My name is DeSantis, and I'm the director. This podcast is our podcast that's specifically for families in crisis. So if you're listening to this podcast today, just wanted to let you know that we have spiritual services available for you and your family for whatever your needs may be. Please do check out our website at nonnatus.org and send us your prayer intentions. Without further ado, I want to introduce to you the president of the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, Mickey Kelly. Mickey, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ann.
Yeah, we're back again with this beautiful series, and this series is the 10 Commandments. So we're doing 4 podcasts. Last time we did the first 3 commandments, and today we're really going to zone in on the 4th one, which is to honoring our father and mother, and really unpacking that in terms of our Catholic faith. What does that really mean, and how can we live it out best in our lives? So I thought we would start out with some reflections from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And if we go to part 3 of the Catechism in Life in Christ, section 2, under the 10 Commandments, there is chapter 2, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, it starts out with, and then goes right into the 4th commandment in article 4. And it says that he was obedient to them, that Jesus himself recalled the force of this commandment of God. The apostle teaches children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. I'll just read a little more. It says the 4th commandment opens the second table of the Decalogue. It shows us the order of charity. God has willed that after him, we should honor our parents to whom we owe life and who have handed on to us the knowledge of God. We are obliged to honor and respect all those whom God, for our good, has vested with his authority. So, Mick, I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. I mean, we're going to unpack that for the next hour during this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking of myself. It also reminds me a line from Exodus 20, verse 12, in which it says, honor your father and your mother so your life will be long on the fertile land that the Lord your God is giving you. And of course, it kind of reminds us like, hey, you're reminded, like, I think it's a biblical way of saying life is short, but make them lasting and filled with love by respecting not just like our parent, like our mother and father, but also like family members, let alone those of us who may have step family. We should also obey them as well. Like we can't really diss them. And of course, too, I mean, of course, it's kind of strange. We're reflecting on this commandment, and we're really seeing a lot family issues left and right. And of course, most of it's been escalating for quite a few years, particularly how the nuclear family is under attack from a lot of sides, especially from the cancel culture, from the from like the isms that go against the Catholic Church, such as communism, socialism, the list goes on. Even relativism, for a fact that children don't have to listen to their parents; they can just give in to what the culture says. When in reality, the parents are the first teachers in our lives. And of course, from a homeschool and mom perspective, you should know full well where I'm coming from with that statement, and I'm sure you like to go deeper into that. But of course, there are times like you get out of hand. There's I like to call it the tough love, where your parents could take away maybe the games. They could discipline, like physically discipline you, like hit you with a spoon, hit you with a fly swatter, hit you with hit the open palm, so to speak, just to knock some sense into you. And of course, like I know there's like some debate over that. However, I'm sure like most parents are different. However, one thing I would hope is a lot of parents do guide their kids to telling them what is right and what is wrong, especially in their early childhood development.
No, that's a great reflection there, because there's a lot of different aspects when it comes to honoring our father and our mother. And certainly we've heard of people who have gone into the physical realm with discipline and things like that. I'm not sure how much we'll get into that on this podcast, because we probably want to reflect on also the just the dutiful aspect of it, right? And also that we're honoring God in this way in particular, right? Because we're honoring our parents, we're also honoring God. And I just found something from Catholicity too. And I'll just read a little bit. It says that this commandment begins the second table of the 10 commandments and shows the correct order of charity. After God, we owe honor first to our parents who have given us life. We must also obey those to whom God has given his authority. This commandment speaks of positive duties, introduces the commandments which regard specific duties, and constitutes the foundation of the church's social doctrine. I think that's interesting too. And just one last piece here. It says that the commandment speaks first to the children concerning their parents, the most universal relationship, but also requires honor toward elders and ancestors. The commandment extends to pupils, employees, and citizens in their relationships to authority. The commandment presupposes the responsibility of those in authority, parents, teachers, and leaders. So I think that's interesting because it's not just, yes, it's our own parents, right? But it's also those authority figures too. And even in the church, right? Because we think of also our clergy, who we refer to as father.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course. The clergy, they do, but we also have to obey them. So say if, the father tells you to like, tells you to, not congregate in the vestibule of the church, which of course we're somewhat navigating through the pandemic. And ever since they started to allow people to go to mass again, the priests have often been reminding people that don't congregate in the vestibule or in like when spaces are typically crowded, let's say like after mass or before mass or something. Like that's not like a hangout place. Of course, like, number one, they want to look out for each other. And two, it's like, of course, like, I don't understand why they should be doing it in the first place when they're in the house of God. That should be a place of prayer, first off. I mean, that's one right there. Then, of course, I remember the stories of like my parents, when they had to always say, yes, sister, like when they were taught by the sisters in Catholic grade school. And of course, like by the brothers and oftentimes priests when they were advancing in Catholic education. And of course, also too, like our bishops. Now, granted, I think also like some people are like debating, like I actually was doing a little bit of like a reflection too, that the Greek word for honor means to revere, prize, and value. And one of the examples is like, we, like you and me, like we may not agree with the decisions made by, let's say, the president of the United States. However, we are still, we should still pray for our leader, of course. And of course, and also that in that matter too, our parents, like not only God, but then of course our parents, they still need to be, revered and valued, through all the days of our lives.
Yeah, it really makes for good thoughts and reflections, I think, there, because all of us are in a different place with our parents, right? Some people listening might be younger people who are living under your parents' roof, and maybe you're still in school or something like that, or not on your own. And then there's people like, say, such as myself, whose parents are elderly. Maybe they're in an assisted living or nursing home or something, or on the way to the end of their lives, right? So it's that whole idea that, as we say in the pro-life, Mickey, right? We say womb to tomb, don't we? So that womb to tomb, you and I as pro-lifers who do go to abortion facilities sometimes and pray, I know you do all the time. And I thank you so much for your work there. But it has to also include those people in the middle, right? And then the people at the end of their lives. I didn't know if you had any reflections on that, because I know as a pro-lifer, sometimes people might ask you that question, what happens after the baby's born, or do you care about people who are, say, elderly in nursing homes, or, the people that are sort of in the middle between life and death.
Well, let's face it. I mean, Saint Teresa of Calcutta once made the remark that you're not going to save every person, or you're not going to feed every person. She reminds us just to focus on the one. Now, granted, too, like, I mean, I understand where a lot of people are coming from with the question, like, well, what do you do after the baby's born? Compared to the whole, compared to the mist that is spilled by the lamestream personalities in the media. Of course, they're too lazy. Every once in a while, I wish they can come down to their ivory tower and visit a pregnancy center and see, pro-lifers in action. In fact, I'm actually participating in an almsgiving opportunity with a young adult group to help the Sisters of Life to collect baby items, because they're running low on them, because I think their client base has grown ever since they became president of Philadelphia about a couple of years ago. Of course, that's my Lenten obligation right there. Ding, bing, bada, boom. But I would also say too, like, you get like, number one, they try to trip you up. Two, I think also they're like in their own bubble. And of course, they don't really take the opportunity to come out of the shells like we often do. And I just think also, number one, they're being very selfish. Two, I think, is that maybe they weren't raised in a loving household. And of course, three, maybe just don't know how to look out for their neighbors, love their neighbors as much as they love themselves. I mean, let's face it. I do appreciate the advancement in technologies and everything. The only thing is, like, I wish every now and again, and I hope this is a challenge to most of you that are listening to this, but if you're one of those people that like to trip up pro-lifers, well, you guys are all pro-birth. You don't care about the baby after it's born. You don't know Jack. The thing is, pro-lifers care about everyone from the moment of conception till natural death, and of course, those that are right in between. So we have fed the hungry. We have given clothes to the naked. We have helped people find a roof. We've helped people that are looking for employment to find, like, a good amount of work to support their child or even their spouse, that matter. And also, we try to connect people with homeless shelters if needed. And also, that feel a little secluded, like especially those in the nursing homes. We do the best we can to visit them.
Oh, absolutely. And I can back up what you said about pro-lifers, because everyone that I've met, and even me being involved in it myself, know where my heart is, caring about people from conception all the way to till natural death. So thank you, Mickey. And it's a great reflection for the fourth commandment, really, because the people who walk into abortion facilities are mothers, would be, they are mothers already if they have a child inside of them, right? And the fathers, I know sometimes you see, or we see the fathers too, that go in with the woman. So by honoring them, I'm looking at this too, Mickey. I don't know if you had any thoughts. By going and praying for them, you're honoring them too. When you're standing outside of an abortion facility, you are actually honoring mothers and fathers by trying to help them to see the dignity of the human life. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, Ann. I mean, I just, of course, like, the way I see the fourth commandment, and well, I should rather say every single commandment there is. The one thing that I definitely see is the fact that, on the surface is like, yeah, you should not, steal, you should not do this or that, or you should honor this person, or whatever the case may be. But there's something a little deeper than what it says on the surface. And it's like, when you look at an onion, you see the surface, but then all you have to do is just keep peeling and you get to, like, the core.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And I think it's also good for us to go to the catechism. If you haven't done that before, now you don't have to pay for a catechism. You can simply go online, right? And the website
Absolutely.
is Vatican.va. And I'll tell you again where you can read about this commandment, part 3, life in Christ. And we're looking at numbers 2197 and down. So I'll just read a little bit more, unpack some of this, is that This commandment includes, now I'm going to repeat a little bit here, presupposes the duties of parents, instructors, teachers, leaders, magistrates, those who govern, all who exercise authority over others or a community or persons. Observing the fourth commandment brings its reward. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Respecting this commandment provides, along with spiritual fruits, temporal fruits of peace and prosperity. Conversely, failure to observe it brings great harm to communities and to individuals. I mean, that's a lot to unpack, isn't it? Because like
For
I
sure.
said, we think of it in terms of honoring our own parents. And yes, it is that, right? It's Mickey honoring your parents and me honoring my parents. But also it's just this whole idea of the effects that it has on society on a whole, right? When people are not honoring their parents. And I think
For
we see
sure.
that with younger people these days, that whole idea of respect for authority and respect for parents. I don't think we're seeing that as often in society as we were before. So it is something for prayer. I believe that. I thought we could also talk about, if we could, Mickey, the idea of, here we are. This is the podcast for families in crisis, specifically for families affected by divorce and separation. So we get a lot of people who listen to our podcast that are, affected by that. And I know that you and I both are adult children of divorce. We both have step parents. So I thought maybe if you wanted to share, that whole idea that, yes, you yourself have a stepfather and your dad. And what is that experience like, do you think, for people who are affected by divorce, who have, more than one parent, right, that they're honoring in that way too?
Mhm. Well, it wasn't really a walk in the park to, just say, when things started out, for my dad, it was like kind of awkward. And then as time, well, of course, like this was at the time, like when my parents were dating. And I think there was like one time I kind of added fuel to the fire, and it was like it was like my boneheaded mistake. Like I was trying to get my stepdad to hide from my dad because I was afraid there was going to be like fist fights or whatever it is. And then I would say by the time I was like in the eighth, by like the time I was like in junior high, things kind of calmed down. They were starting to chit chat. They were, conversing and whatnot. It got to the point where my dad was gonna offer to take my stepdad target shooting because he had like when my stepdad was working for the VA. He was a nurse at the time. This was about a year prior to his retirement. He offered like, hey, do you want to go target shooting? It was going to be him, my brother, and it was going to be them, my brother and my nephew. And my nephew was like 13, maybe 14 years old when this happened. And like my stepdad, declined it, but he really offered to say, well, of course, my stepdad is a veteran, so he did have to learn how to handle a weapon himself as a Marine. And of course, like there were times like my dad also like we had to take like him and my mom like up to like running around if they had to, like the market or like doctor's appointments or whatever. So it wasn't really like it was like I would say it went from like awkward to like they kind of like didn't really talk to each other much. And then when there were like momentous occasions happening, or just like every day in general, they were always conversing with each other, over like what's been going on lately, over of course they were like also friendly manners too. So as a matter of fact, my stepdad even got along with one of my dad's brothers quite well, because one, they served in the Marine Corps, respectively, and they also like always looking to bend each other's ears over things.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that experience, because there are quite a few people, I think, like ourselves, that have had step parents, and we're extending that out, that when you are that person who's affected by divorce, and maybe you are an adult child of divorce, and your parents have been annulled and remarried again, it's that whole idea of continuing to honor your father and your mother, right? And learning to listen for God's voice in all of it, right? Because that's where we need to be guided by is through our prayer in how to deal with every personality and in every family situation. So thanks for sharing about that. I'm going to read a little bit more about this whole idea of the family and God's plan. And this, again, is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church 2201. It says the conjugal community is established upon the consent of the spouses. Marriage and family are ordered for the good of the spouses and to the procreation and education of children. The love of the spouses and the begetting of children create among members of the same family personal relationships and primordial responsibilities. A man and woman united in marriage together with their children form a family. The institution is prior to any recognition by public authority, which has an obligation to recognize it. It should be considered the normal reference point by which the different forms of family relationship are to be evaluated. I mean, there's a lot more, but point being is that God ordered the family, right? God ordered the mother, the father, the children. And it is a domestic church. And so just like we honor our priests and our bishops, right? We're honoring the head of the household. And I think that's where the commandment leads us to, is that just that whole idea of, it doesn't mean that it's a dictatorship, right? I mean, it's an honoring. Didn't know if you had anything else to say on that.
Oh, I agree with you. Like, of course, like we also see throughout the Bible that there has been some prominent figures in it that, calls like children to, respect their parents. Like if we look at King Solomon, he reminds us a few times in Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs, that we must respect their children. But of course, we cannot outgrow God's commandments to honor them. Even Jesus himself, and we remind, like we also see in the second chapter of Luke, that Jesus submitted himself to both his earthly parents and his heavenly Father, which we see that in the Gospel of Matthew towards like the end, of course. Then, of course, we also see in the letter, and also the prophet Malachi, as well as Hebrews, that we are called to also follow Christ's example to treat our parents, that we should reverently approach our heavenly Father.
Yeah. It's very, very true. Our Heavenly Father is also someone we should be honoring, probably in the greatest of ways. And by that, it's actually following the commandments too, isn't it? And the Beatitudes. Not that the Beatitudes are rules and regulations. I mean, they're guidelines of faith that we can grow, right? And become better Christians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, hey, there's a reason why the Catholic Church has rules. And it's not just to try to scare people away or whatever, of course, I mean, like, why else do you think there are, why do you think there are 3 strikes and you're out in baseball, or you don't gain 10 yards before 4th down? Why do you think that exists in football? And then again, why do you think the referees throw yellow flags if you're caught interfering in a pass, you're holding a receiver when you're defending, or you're just caught, holding someone with your arm or whatever in the middle of a play? Why do those rules exist? I mean, as a matter of fact, in hockey, they have a thing called the penalty box.
Yeah, good points, because rules exist for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we need rules. We do.
And come to think of it, actually, it just occurred to me that the 3rd Sunday of Lent, really the first reading reflects on all 10 of the commandments, which of course, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, and we have the theme of 40 again that pops up once more. And this time Moses is up there for 40 days learning about the law of God, which is, you shall not. Of course, we covered the first 3 commandments the last time we had this wonderful podcast, and now we're like kind of kicking off the commandments in which we learn how to love not just our neighbors, but of course, ourselves. And of course, we're going to delve a little more into it later, into the next round of the next couple of podcasts, of course. That I guess another thing too, it's like we're also reminded that and of course we also see in the Gospel of Matthew that Jesus even tells the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 15 that we are that they remind the Pharisees of the commandment of God to honor their father and their mother. And of course, as we delve a little deeper, they were obeying the law, the letter of the law, but of course the problem is they were adding their own traditions that essentially overruled it. So we have to keep in mind too that honor is more than a lip service. Honor demands a right action. So we have to, in a sense, not only honor our parents by our word, but we also honor them with our actions. So things like making them a breakfast, maybe on their anniversary. Every now and again, I would definitely recommend take them out to dinner, especially if you have a family whatsoever, or just spending time with them. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money, but quality time. Last time I checked, quality time is free.
Exactly. No, that's awesome. And I also like your reflection about being the adult child of divorce, that, you did have some changes in your family, but from what it sounds like, for the most part, there is a certain getting along between your father and even your stepdad, and that whole, over time, right? There was a certain idea that they were able to understand and realize that you're the child that was between your dad, your biological father, and your mother, and your stepdad has a place there too now, since your mom was annulled and remarried. So would you have any words of advice for somebody listening that, they are that adult child of divorce, that maybe they are trying to find it in their heart to honor their parents in a better way, and how you came to be where you are right now, where you have that instilled inside your heart and in your actions?
Well, first thing I would definitely recommend is don't add fuel to the fire, especially if there's if let's say your mom is dating, someone that could potentially be your stepfather, or vice versa, your dad, potentially the stepmom. That's first off. But I mean, I should rather say my first advice is, pray for them. I don't think you'll exactly know the whole details of what went down between your parents that they had to split. It could be good reasons. I mean, I wouldn't say everything was good, but maybe there were some bad reasons. For me, of course, there was the lack of love between my parents, and it really shows, because I still, and there oftentimes that there was a lot of yelling in my house, and there were times my mom wasn't really that calm, and of course most of the time was correcting me and my older siblings. So first off, pray for them. Two, don't instigate anything. Just let God take control of the situation. I mean, I think that's very essential, especially if you hope it's something fruitful can come out of it. The other thing I would definitely suggest is, spend time with them equally. There are times I was spending time with my mom one weekend, another weekend I'm spending time with my dad. And of course, I was also still doing things for my grandma, who was alive, just my dad's mom. And also too, with my surviving grandfather on my dad's side, doing things for them, whether it be simple chores or whatever, or just just sitting around. My favorite thing with my grandma would be she would ask me in the morning, "Did you have your orange juice yet?" And I would probably say no. So I would pour a thing of orange juice, or oftentimes I would get her a bowl of vanilla ice cream, and I would oftentimes join her. We would be watching reruns of Law and Order or something, and she would be so quick to point out who is guilty of that crime, like who killed this person, who killed that person. It's kind of hysterical just watching stuff like that. So, in fact, her birthday was on the 26th of February. It just occurred to me on that one. So, she would have been 87, and I'm sure she would have been really proud to hear me if she was eager to get with the times a little bit, because I don't think she was really a big fan of technology.
Wow.
But that's okay. Yeah. But she had a TV and she was all good,
Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing your reflection on that. Because, our grandparents and our elderly relatives that have gone before us, they're somehow, some way, we always pray for their souls, but we know that they're always with us somehow, aren't they?
Mhm. As a matter of fact, the past couple of years, I've made sure that they were included in the mass intention calendar for the upcoming year. In fact, usually I have my dad's father included for the usually like in March. His birthday is the 11th, so he's like roughly like 2 weeks before my dad's birthday, and it's very fitting. Like it was just a week before the feast of Saint Joseph and St. Patrick's Day. So it's a bit of like very fitting that I have a mass offer for him. But oftentimes I will also offer mass for him on the anniversary of his death. And then of course I would also, but then I just thought, I just thought there were too many people to fill the calendar up for. So I just thought like the deceased, generally speaking, like the deceased members of like my my dad's side of the family. And then I'll also do the same thing for like my mom's side, like my grandma's, my maternal grandma's like maiden name, her family. Then of course, like my maternal grandfather's family. So, and no question about it, they really appreciate that.
I'm glad you brought that up, offering masses. Isn't that important? I mean, and I don't think everybody's doing that, but it is a way, to be quite blunt, it's an way to honor father and mother, isn't it? Especially for people listening that their parents are deceased or their grandparents. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's a really a perfect thing for us to reflect on doing. Giving a mass or offering a mass for someone is probably the best gift you can give. So I think God definitely was working through you when you brought that one up for this podcast. So thank you. I wanted to reflect on something I just found from rosarycenter.org on the 10 commandments, and specifically on the fourth commandment. It says that it is a positive commandment directing us to do something good rather than avoiding something evil. To honor parents is an essential element of family life and the family, whether it is composed of those related by blood or a voluntary organization of individuals who elect to share their lives for the common good. It's the social unit which establishes the fundamental basis of the church's social teaching. That's interesting, isn't it? So doesn't it really combine together with the domestic church, but then extends out to people that we are around in our neighborhoods, communities, cities, diocese, archdiocese? I mean, it just all comes together, doesn't it? I really think that it comes together that way. When you think about how it grows, it starts in the home, right?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I mean, of course, of course, just fitting that we had the World Meeting of Families for the first time in the United States and in Philadelphia. And the theme actually was the family fully alive, which kind of derives from a quote from Saint Irenaeus. And there's like something borrowed from him. And then it in turn, it became the theme of, the gathering. And one of the things that like that we could really draw away from it is that like the family's a domestic church, and in order for society to survive, we really need to defend the nuclear family. And I mentioned earlier that the family's under attack by everything from the media to the culture, that the list goes on. Even people that we deemed as public servants, they're oftentimes like their policies or their ideas they are fallen short. And of course, most of it is not centered around, teachings of social, Catholic teachings, of course. Most of it is contrary to it. But we as Catholics, we have a duty to defend the family. And even in one of the warnings from Our Lady of Fatima, she reminds us that the family will be under attack. And we have an obligation to defend it. And when the family's gone, so goes society. So we have to be, and of course, let's face it, if we are authentically Catholic, we must be eager to, be at the ready, be the church militant, be in the trenches, so to speak. Fathers, that head the households, making sure that they're providing for the families, leading prayers oftentimes, the mother, nurturing their children, whatever case, from time to time. So, but also too, like, of course, and of course, one of the pillars of the family is prayer. Even if, servant of God, Father Patrick Payton, who's very known for his rosary crusades, and as a matter of fact, we're going to need more of it nowadays. If we look at how we are in the 21st century, we need more rosary crusades, and we need more families praying. And in order for that to be a success, we need to get the fathers involved. You forget about this whole, feminism saying like, oh, men are no good. The last time I checked, men are essential in our society, whether it's the workforce, whether it's, defending their spouse, their children from the snares of the devil, coming at them at all forces, whether it's from those that claim to be teachers, but they still want to spill, the indoctrination on them if they, once their kids are in this classroom. I mean, like I said a moment ago, the parents are the first teachers. And they do have a right to say, no, I don't want your kids in this program, or no, I don't want your kids, be involved with this or that. And there's a reason for it, and of course, like, number one, I would say thank them later. Two, the parents are trying to make the best decisions for their kids possible, even if it means guiding them to walk in the path of Christian perfection.
No, that's beautiful. And I love what you said about the fathers being the protectors of the families. It's not a bad thing because, like you said, there's a mixed message with feminism. Real feminism is a woman to be able to live out the mission that God has set for her, right? And not all these mixed messages of what society puts on women. Not to say that there's nothing wrong at all with having a career and with being able to help earn income for your family if needed, right? I mean, I myself was a stay-at-home mom for years. I know that not everybody's able to do that. A lot of women do work, when they're the mothers in the household. But the point being is that real feminism is about being able to live the mission that God has set before you as a woman with your own special talents, right? Everybody has their own gifts and talents, mothers, fathers, children, young, old, middle age. So that's something to consider. It's a whole idea of honoring everyone in society. I do have another thing that I just read here. It's from that same article from rosarycenter.org on the 10 Commandments. It says that the family becomes the classroom in which we come to know and love God and to embrace the moral values that are necessary for a productive social life and essential for our Christian life. And I think that's something to consider, is that our lives can be a classroom, but those moral values and what we learn in the 10 Commandments and the Beatitudes too, and even those 2 great commandments, they're the teachings that God is giving us, right? So this in teaching about honoring your mother and your father, it is a very important one that we can't forget as a society, both in the domestic church and also through our communities and the entire world. So, and society has an obligation to care for, like you said, for the rights of families. And again, I'll read something else. They must be alert to guarantee the necessary elements and services families may not be able to provide for themselves. And that's where Catholic social teaching comes in, right? Organizations like, say, Catholic Charities Appeal, where they're helping people who are in need, don't have enough food to eat, need some help, maybe some mental health services, right? For all the things that happen, addictions, right? There's a lot of people who suffering from addictions within families, and that does hurt family life too. And, that's part of what we do as a foundation, because we offer services, spiritual services, to pray for families who are in crisis. So like I said again at the beginning, that we are here for you. If you or someone would like to talk to a priest, make an appointment and talk about some of the issues that you have, please check out our helpful resources page on our website at nonnatus.org. We have a lot of resources there, that things that can really help you for whatever your situation is and that your family is going through. So Mickey, I didn't know if you had any other reflections for people listening. How about we might have some young parents who are on the call here listening on the podcast who have young children. How can they best instill this whole idea of honor thy father and mother with their younger children?
I think it's a good question. And like, one of the things that I would suggest is, like, let's face it. I mean, the kids are going to be at the, like, if they have really young children before they start going to school, and, they're going to be, and let's face it, their patience is going to be tested. I know that for a fact, because I've done that many times. I'm not afraid to admit it. But to actually put on a serious tone is that parents, just don't be, just first and foremost, be patient with your kids. 2, they have a very curious mind. So answer every question. Well, let's face it, they're going to ask you why, until you finally say, because I said so. And let's face it, kids at a very young age, like they have a very curious mind, and that's how they start their learning process. They start learning these things. And I think, honestly, a little hands-on learning goes a little, like, probably say a longer way than if we were, learning from like a textbook or something. And as far as discipline is concerned, just don't be afraid to lay down the law to your kids, especially at a young age. I mean, face it, you're gonna probably catch your kids trying to do the darndest things, and you're just like, you may think it's amusing at first, but then you're just like, oh, no, that's too far. This is, and of course you have to also remind them that you, like, number one, make sure you're reminding you love them. And 2, just make sure you continue in enforcing the law, but also just still love your kids no matter what happens at the end of the day.
No, that's well said, because it's a combination between loving and guiding. And yeah, sometimes you're going to catch your kids doing things that you don't like. And that's why we need to exercise to them and let them know how important it is to know and understand, like, that 4th commandment, right? I mean, because we as parents, I think we have a responsibility. And you were talking to me about homeschooling. And so for me, I have 2 daughters, as you know, Mickey, and we were home for many years. And so being that opportunity of being the homeschooling mother was that I had that opportunity to be with them pretty much all the time, aside from when they had activities outside of the house. So, but with each parenting stage, right, it's different at each stage. No matter, your little kids, your kids that are under the age of 3, and then you have, like, say 4 to 7 or 8, and then 8 or 9 up until the preteen years, and then the teenage years. So with each of those stages, it's different. But I think the whole concept of that respect for the parents has to be instilled, right, at a young age. I'm just speaking from my own experience, but and also looking again at this article that I found, I think there's something else that it talks about, the idea that the role of education is very, very important When families function properly, children grow to see elements of their own families in the world. In their peers, they see reflection of their brothers and sisters, and in each person, they see an individual who is a child of the God who has revealed himself as our Father. And then I'll just read a little bit more. It says, thus the neighbors we pray for are not faceless, anonymous others, but become individuals with hopes, dreams, and needs, deserving respect, compassion, and care. And you can read more about this right in the catechism. It's at, the catechism is 221 is the number. But I think what it comes down to is that instilling in the hearts of a parent and knowing that we want our kids to have good self-esteem, right? We want them to have confidence, but we also want them to have that respect for authority. I didn't know if you wanted to speak a little bit on that, because I do think that in our society that needs to be taught in a better way in general, I think, to young people, not only for their parents, but teachers, authority, and also even our clergy too. And we know there's been difficulty there. Let's face it. I mean, the church has had a lot of very not good issues with that. So that's why they've developed something like Safe Environment, right? Where we learn how to interact with people under the age of 18 in a proper way with Catholic guidelines. Did you have anything on that, Mickey?
Well, I think it's very essential too, especially considering that we're not completely out of the woods with the whole, like we mentioned about, we talked about the clergy, of course. We weren't going to let them off the hook very easily with this episode in the podcast here, Anne. So some of the things too is parents too, if you really suspect any of the priests kind of like acting very strange, my suggestion is definitely to discuss it with the vicar of the clergy, or let alone also if you have to like go next step, like go like completely up, just make sure you inform the authorities about it. That's very important. You could keep in mind too, there's a reason why the church is referred to as mom, and then priests are referred to as fathers. And of course the priest, they have an obligation to defend that spouse, which is Mary, the church. And some people don't even realize that. And of course, you have this debate like, oh, well, we need more women to be priests. There were 12, I hate to break it to you, Karen, but there were 12 men in Jerusalem on Holy Thursday. They instituted the Eucharist. There were no women, but there were women disciples. Yes. Now, this is not to come off sexist or anything, folks, but the fact is that there's a reason why men are fathers, women are mothers. Mary is the spouse is known as the mother of the church, and we have fathers that are male, and they are men. And even Jesus knew full well that he was to issue the Eucharist, his body and blood, which was given to us, and we must accept it freely. Especially, have all this chaos about, oh, my body, my choice. But you forget that you are a temple of God. And we kind of see that in the reflection from the third, in the readings from the third Sunday in Lent. We see it in Exodus when Moses received the 10 Commandments. And then the second reading, Corinthians, or whatever that second reading is, but from St. Paul, that we are temples of God. We have to take care of it. You see all these people, they engage in fitness, and they also want to change their diets and everything. That's great. But we're like, now we shouldn't do that for Lent, but we should do it through like every day of our lives. Now, if we get like, well, I don't have one, but hey, my body's kind of naked without tattoos, and I'll go okay with that. But space. Well, some people do have a story. Like maybe they had like they went through like a wrong path, and they look at this tattoo like this kind of reminds me. Like, let's face it. Like there maybe some people do like I don't think all tattoos are bad. And if you do something religious, that's okay. I think there may be a gray line right there, but I don't know. I'm not a theological scholar or anything, but but in essence, like you have to understand that. Like we also keep in mind too, like we should not also just like, not just like we have to be careful how we interact with people. And it's not just like, priests, like, with children, but also with us. Like, there are times like, when we get together and like we laugh, have a good time, have a little bit of like, have like some good food and, some wine, and, we have like a few laughs here and there, but then in the midst of it, we still have some deep discussions. But some people are not going to hear that because this is going to be off the air.
Right. So it makes sense. I mean, what it comes down to is that, we all have responsibilities, and we live in a world, yes, sin is there, right? We live in a world that there's temptations and sins that in front of us. So we always have to remember in all of it, these commandments. And this one is very important. This one about the parents. So what I would say is that, now this is from the Catechism, CCC 2223. Parents bear responsibilities to this responsibility first by creating a home where tenderness, forgiveness, respect, fidelity, and disinterested service are the rule. The home is well suited for education in the virtues. This requires an apprenticeship in self-denial, sound judgment, and self-mastery, the preconditions of all true freedom. So we just have to keep in mind that, just like in the Garden of Eden, right? Everything was good. And then, the devil came and there was temptation there. But thank God that, Jesus came. He died for us so that we could have eternal life. We have our Catholic Church. We have the gift of what I've been reading from here is the Catechism, which is a good guideline for all of us, the Bible. I want to mention too that in Exodus 22-17, you'll find the 10 Commandments, and also Deuteronomy 5:6-21. So, read your Bible. And at the time that we're taping this, it is during Lent, but by the time it gets aired, it's going to be in the Easter season. It'll be in April.
Mm-hmm,
so,
for sure.
But it's still good for us to keep in mind that, God is calling us all the time, isn't he? Through his Holy Spirit, he's calling us to be better people. He's calling us to live who we are. Doesn't mean we're going to be perfect at times. And, it's not a bad thing, for us to enjoy time with our families, laugh, have dinner, a glass of wine, just like you mentioned a few minutes ago. No commandments broken there when you're just having a good time with friends and honoring one another in our conversations. But we do need to, there's a seriousness of life too. And we always want to go back to that and remember that we need to care about people. We need to care about our elders. We need to respect others. And we need to remember that this commandment means something, right? This particular one. And for me, where I am in my state of life as a person in her 50s, you get parents that are older. And we need to respect and honor them no matter where they are, sick or deceased. My father happens to be deceased. So of course I offer masses sometimes for him and prayers. And we have to just try our best. Life is not perfect, but we are called to love others and be the people that God has called us to be.
Absolutely.
That's right. Did you have any final words? Because I know we're going to be ending in just a couple minutes. And so we have 2 more podcasts where we're going to unpack the rest of the commandments. And so join us this is the Families in Crisis podcast, and it's held the last Thursday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern time.
I think we covered it all, and just wanted to remind people, just don't forget to honor your parents, your elderly, living or deceased. And some of the things you can definitely do is like offer a mass for them, offer a rosary for them. Let alone, I also would suggest, like, the next time you go before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, offer a holy hour for them.
Yes, very, very important. Mickey,
and also too, if I also may add too, don't forget the priests, because they should, you should hold them to a high esteem as well. Because And let's face it, you have no idea what they go through day in and day out. I mean, it's one thing you see them on the pulpit every given Sunday, but you just don't know what happens during the other 6 days of the week.
Well, they're overwhelmed, I think, and there's a lot going on right now during this particular time of the pandemic. So, as we're coming out of the pandemic. So hopefully by the time this airs, things will be much, much better than they are as we're still coming out of it. So, Mickey, thank you so much again. And I want to ask all of our viewers also, and our listeners, I should say, to do connect with us at nonnatus.org. Thank you so much. And we will see you again next month here on the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation Families in Crisis podcast. God bless.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. For more information about the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, visit nonnatus.org or email director.srnf@gmail.com.